Hi everyone, I'm Phoebe. I'm the founder of the PMDD Project, and welcome to the Monthly Truth, where this week we are speaking to the wonderful Kim, who is a trustee of the PMDD Project, does amazing work for the charity. She is here, there and everywhere with supporting our mission. And yeah, I'm just really, really excited to speak to you, Kim, because I speak to you every day, but I just think your story is incredible. It's inspiring. It's difficult to listen to, but it really shines a light on the reality of PMDD. And so I suppose a little disclaimer for anyone that's watching this can be a really difficult listen. And yeah, I think it's just to be aware of the fact that this is a really extreme experience. And so if you are watching this, make sure to be kind to yourself. And if you do need any extra support, then reach out to us and go onto our website and check out the amazing resources that we've got. So without further ado, hi Kim.
Hi.
So firstly, we'll get straight into it, but thank you so much for talking to us today and sharing your experience. I just think you are such an amazing advocate for PMDD, so thank you.
I'm getting such a big head already.
Good, you should. So can you just share a little bit about your journey with PMDD? When did you first start experiencing PMDD symptoms? How did you come to realise that it actually is PMDD?
Well, I think this is a question that I never really know 100% how to answer, because I still haven't got like a definitive one of like, have I always had PMDD? And I officially got diagnosed with it in 2021, maybe? That's when, and in 2020 during lockdown was when I had the worst onset of symptoms. But I think from the various consultants I've spoken to, I'm leaning towards the idea that I've always had PMDD, but a lot of people apparently don't get the extreme symptoms until they kind of approach 30, around the 30 mark. There are exceptions, but I think that's what applies to me. So yeah, it was maybe 4 years ago now that I've been diagnosed.
What would you say are the main symptoms that you would experience?
So I'll just describe the ones like during lockdown and since then, because that was really when it was noticeably PMDD. So I think like the mood dips. I don't really like calling them mood swings, because it's just like, it kind of, I don't know, it infers that it's just like, but actually it was just like the depth of the mood swings were so extreme that it was just like, and I could be in that place for days. So it wasn't just depression, which I think I've definitely had experience of in the past. It was like a different level of depression where it's the dysphoria side of the PMDD, where it doesn't really feel like you're in the room. It doesn't really feel like, I've found out since that some people don't have an internal monologue, which is just weird. But my internal monologue was kind of just like being hijacked for a couple of days. It started off with just the week before my period, and then I guess by the end of lockdown it was 2 to 3 weeks out of every month that I would just, it would like be this severe depression where I would have suicidal ideation, and I get really paranoid. I just assume that even the people that undoubtedly loved me so much just were getting sick of me, or that I'd said something wrong, or I don't know, that I wasn't very good at my job, and all of these things, and stuff that's just so out of character for me. I think most people would agree with that know me. I hope so. But so apart from obviously the suicidal ideation and the paranoia, I just wasn't being able to sleep at night properly. The insomnia, the migraines were just insane. Like, I'd had headaches before, but these migraines were like nausea, actually vomiting, not being able to eat, and yeah, just not being able to think properly. The cramping as well was, I never really know how to describe it apart from, usually with a menstrual cramp, it would just like squeeze and release. And obviously everybody experiences different levels of pain with that. But with these ones, it was like cramp, and the actual cramp could last for minutes, which feels like a lot longer when they're happening. So yeah, I wasn't really able to kind of function, but I think I certainly for a while was, in hindsight, maybe gaslighting myself and just sort of thinking everyone is going through such a surreal, horrible time during lockdown. People are dying and I can't really complain that I have bad periods. And everyone's depressed. Everyone's depressed at the moment. Everyone's a bit paranoid because we're in a pandemic. It's a once in a lifetime kind of thing, hopefully. So yeah, I didn't really take my symptoms that seriously until I was lucky to live with my best friend at the time, and we had a very a very honest conversation about me desperately needing help, not just in the moments where I was suicidal, but in general. So yeah, that's how we got to the point of actually trying to get a diagnosis.
And then, so obviously, and it's interesting, before you said that it feels like you've been hijacked with the thoughts that you're experiencing and the suicidal ideation as well, And I think that's a really interesting analogy of it, because I think it is like someone's taken over your mind and is telling you what to do, what to think, how to be. But and I know it was during COVID, which in itself would have brought so many challenges. And you've said before that everyone was really struggling. So you've kind of downplayed your own experience with PMDD, I think.
I still do it. It's annoying. It's so annoying. I wouldn't let anybody else do that. And I am kicking myself that I still do it. Yeah.
We all do it. But how has PMDD, obviously, by the sounds of it, with the severity of your symptoms, it's going to impact your life. How has it impacted, different aspects of your life, whether that be professional life, relationships? How has it impacted it?
I mean, professionally, it's hard to pinpoint if a job was particularly bad for me and it wasn't working for me, then maybe it was a good thing that I ended up leaving. But realistically, I quit my job during the first sort of 6 months of the onset of symptoms because I couldn't explain what was going on, and there wasn't really, as lovely as I think some people were, and they wanted to make my work life easier, like putting a screen on my laptop when I was home working for the migraines. It was like, I can't predict when I'm going to feel like this, because it had kind of taken over half the month before my period. And every time they would try to review to see if I was ready to go back to work, it would be like, well, what did the doctor say? And as you know, it was hard enough trying to speak to a doctor, let alone your doctor during lockdown. So you could maybe get through to one-on-one, or you could get through to Mind or Shout or the Samaritans. But for me to say to my employer, I've been trying to speak to a GP, but I'm just getting fobbed off, just wasn't really good enough. So I think that caused tension and I just left. Certainly it's caused issues with relationships. I don't know how much you want me to go into it,
but entirely as much as you're comfortable.
I think there's an element of kind of, that a lot of the time you're not feeling 100%. So the rest of the time, I think I kind of did too much, because I did have a partner during lockdown. And I think I just tried too hard to kind of do everything for them and make sure they were okay, because I just saw myself as a burden. And it kind of just messes with the dynamic of a relationship. It's not equal. And I certainly hid a lot. I think it was only my best friend that really saw the worst of it, and God bless him. I think he still needs therapy because of what he went through with all that. But yeah, and I suppose the paranoia side of things is just like, I always feel really, what's the word? I guess paranoid about it. But like, I guess worried or anxious. I'm anxious when I talk about the paranoia because I recently, like in the last 6 months, I think I went on a date with somebody. It might be longer than 6 months ago, but it stuck in my head. I mentioned about PMDD because generally I talk about it a little bit more these days. And they mentioned an episode of Law and Order where a young girl murdered somebody and she got a lesser sentence or got away with it because she had PMDD. And he was just like, I just want you to know that I've had bad experiences with women in the past, and if there is an anger issue here, like, first of all, I can't really say how I feel about Law and Order doing that without a disclaimer. Because not everyone with PMDD has pure rage, and even if they do, it doesn't make them an abuser. But that's one thing with relationships that I'm still navigating, because I don't really get a lot of the rage symptoms that come with PMDD. But even if I did, it doesn't mean that I don't know how to treat somebody. So there is a stigma attached to it, for sure.
I think you bang on there. Like I experienced the rage. Oh my God, I experienced the rage. But I think, that stigma is really difficult. It's really damaging for people with
There's still
PMDD.
no place for women to be angry in like Western society. So anywhere in the whole world. Like, let's not get into politics, my God. But like, we have the ability to feel anger just as much as men, and arguably have a lot of reasons to feel that way. And there's literally a medical condition that makes us feel that way. And the stigma and the shame attached to it is ridiculous. I say there's still there's a lot of stigma attached to the suicidal ideation and the depression as well. But at least then people will still kind of see that you're some kind of a victim in this situation. Whereas with the anger, it's just people are quite scared of talking about it openly.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, definitely. And I suppose going back to, because you said that you discovered, I suppose, PMDD, and you recognised that you had PMDD during COVID, which must have been really tough in terms of getting a diagnosis, because the backlog of sort of appointments and everything was already such an issue. Getting a diagnosis with PMDD is an issue in itself. How long did it take for you to get a diagnosis? What was the process like for you personally?
I now realise that I was quite lucky with how quickly I was diagnosed, because obviously now working with the wonderful PMDD Project, I have access to a lot more statistics now. So I know, like, on average, people can spend 12 years trying to get a diagnosis. I think I waited for about a year. Well, I'll say waited. I didn't wait. Me and my best friend were proverbially kicking a lot of arse. Can I say that? I just said it.
You can.
And it was, I don't know how many medical practitioners we spoke to, how many urgent care units or A&E when things got really bad, when I didn't feel safe. And my God, A&E during lockdown especially, and even since, because it's still got the backlog, it is like no man's land there. So when you are feeling so scared of your own brain and you're just waiting in this, yeah, it was horrible. But thankfully, after a lot of bad experiences with sort of locum GPs, one who bearing in mind I was about 31 at the time, he asked me if I'd ever heard of PMT.
Don't get me started. Yeah.
And I was kind of speechless, but yeah, no, I've heard of it because I'm a grown-ass woman. Like, I know other women, believe it or not, we all talk. And like, I just couldn't believe it. And then I heard him typing into like Google, because I know it was Google because I did the same thing. I typed in all my symptoms and it came up with exactly the same link, and he was reading it word for word of an article off Google. And I it's hard not to be furious about it. I know that obviously they don't get that training. We're a long way off everyone having that training in the NHS, but at the time it was just, I was so exhausted because at that point I only had maybe a week and a half every month of actually feeling like me, where I had enough strength or enough clarity in my head to actually fight for some help. So if somebody eventually fobs you off, which we all know, like I said, it's very hard to get a phone appointment during lockdown. It certainly is now. And then to wait all that time for an appointment for somebody, and let's just be honest about it, the majority of the time it was men of a certain age, that the doctors that had that, but once or twice it was women as well, who just never heard of PMDD. Yeah, so that was hard. It's beyond disappointing because it's what you were desperate for is some kind of hope that this isn't going to go on forever, that I could get a job again, or I could be in a relationship again, or have a social life again when everything opens up, when lockdown's over. And it can be hard to keep going for sure. Luckily, after lockdown, we moved to a different area in Birmingham. So I registered with a new doctor. And on my first appointment with her, she said, yep, sounds like PMDD, and made an urgent referral. And then it was within a month or two, I think, the referral came through, and I have an amazing consultant at Birmingham Women's Hospital. And I was put on treatment that day. So things have definitely improved. And I think it was just validation as well, that it was just like, you're not making this up. This is a known condition. There is treatment for it, and you don't have to live like this. Like, it was huge.
Couldn't agree more. I think just getting that validation of a diagnosis makes such a difference. You can actually put a name to your symptoms. You can actually feel like, no, you're not being dramatic, which I know GPs can, or medical professionals can make you feel like you are. And there's actually something wrong that needs to be fixed. I think it's incredibly validating. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the treatment that you're on and that you're undergoing. I know you're currently undergoing chemical menopause, and that you're actually making the decision to have a full hysterectomy as well. So how has the experience of chemical menopause been for you so far?
Well, yeah, so like I said, on my first appointment with beautiful Dr. Khan, you know this, I go on about this guy all the time.
He's amazing. So
he's a local hero as far as I'm concerned. It's going to be really awkward for him when I have my next consultation if he watches this. So on the first day, I was put on the first part of the treatment, which is for 6 months. You have pro-stap injections. I can't remember the full word for it. Lorapurulline or something like that. Anyway, pro-stap, let's call it pro-stap. And there is an option to have monthly injections or an injection every 3 months. I did try the 3 months one, but it did not work for me. It ran out. It felt like it ran out too quickly. So yeah, 6 months of just post-op, all periods stop. And essentially you have menopausal symptoms, and they should be what you'd get naturally when you go through it naturally. And luckily for me, my mum and my nan both had really straightforward menopausal phases, so it wasn't too bad, and anything really was better than what I was going through. So I did have a bit of insomnia, but I was used to it. The night sweats are real. The hot flushes are real. Like, I just don't know how, say, in my head, it kept going to, how did women in Victorian times go through the menopause with all these layers and bonnets and corsets and petticoats? And I'm just like, I was sitting there in a vest top in like autumn time, and I was just sweating. But all of that said, it was way better than what I was going through. And instead of being really, really depressed, I would cry at like my dog doing something cute and just be like really emotional, but in like a really happy way, like in that GIF with Kim Kardashian. And then after 6 months, they introduced HRT back because the post-op, women going through the menopause in general will know that you need to balance things out with HRT because of your bone density. So that is part of the treatment as well. So every year, I think, we have to have a bone density scan, and have add back vitamin D prescribed, which you take daily to protect your bones. And the HRT side of things, it's taken a long time to find the right balance and the right brand for me. I was on Everil Conti patches for over a year, and it's really hard, I think. Well, it was for me to find the right dosage. Like, we'd have a patch that, you know, at sometimes we're using a patch and a half, and then the other times it would be like, do one patch for 3 days and then change it to a quarter of a patch for the rest of it, or doing that for months and months to try and find the right dosage. We found it, and then randomly last year I became allergic to the adhesive on the patches, so I was trying different brands, and now finally we found the right dosage, and I'm using the HRT gel with tablets as well. So yeah, it's a whirlwind, really. They are an incredible team though, so I'm very lucky. And yeah, I think symptoms wise, off the back of doing the treatment, obviously I still have PMDD. The only issue I would say, as much as I have a reprieve, like it's not as often, and it's usually not as intense, the symptoms. It does mean that because I don't have periods anymore, I don't have a luteal phase, which means I can't really predict when things are going to get difficult. And for sure, I have had 1 or 2 really scary episodes where I have ended up in A&E, mostly because I couldn't keep myself safe. And thankfully, eventually, one of those visits to A&E ended up with a referral to the community mental health team, and they were incredible. So you have an allocated worker at that point and a phone number that you can call like anytime, day or night, which was just like, how did it take this long for me to get this? Because as wonderful as it is to have like a free text line and a phone number where you can call for like in crisis and stuff, I can't tell you how important it was to be able to pick up the phone and actually speak to somebody who knew me and knew how PMDD affects me and even knew what PMDD was. So that was great. I have at one point, it did get to, there was thankfully, a a failed attempt at suicide, and it's probably the most scary situation I've ever been in, because the secretive part of it is that, I mean, it was just like being driven by something else. And I snuck out of the house at night, even though my housemate was there, and I know that they would have supported me. But you don't have those thoughts when it's that bad. And yeah, I went out to the park with like a pocket full of what was it, sleeping tablets at the time. I just sat in the rain, and I don't really know how I got through it, apart from there was something to do with my nan, who I was very close to. And I mean, believe it or not, I don't, some people won't believe it. It sounds too like spiritual or whatever, but I distinctly remember my nan telling me to just get up and walk. And I mean, at the time I was on crutches because I'd also been in a road traffic accident. So I was just in a park at like 10, 11 o'clock at night in the rain, just like hobbling around and just keep going until you're knackered, then go home. And that's what I did. And I just, ever since then, I've just been I'm just so grateful to even have such, even though my nan's not around anymore, like knowing that there's been somebody in my life that when I think of them, and I know how protective they were of me, and I wouldn't argue with her, even though she was like 4 foot tall and looked like a hobbit. I wouldn't argue with her. So she, without a doubt, got me through. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It gives me goosebumps every time I hear that story. I think it's just the brutal reality of PMDD, and for you to share that is so powerful, because I'm sure many people can resonate with that and feel less alone listening to your experience. So thank you so much. And I know that you've made the difficult decision to have a full hysterectomy. Can you sort of tell me about what led you to that decision, and what factors I suppose you have to consider with that full hysterectomy as well?
Yeah, I think I mean, it was something that was discussed early on. I think even on my first consultation, Dr. Khan, that makes it look like I fancy him. I don't fancy him. I think I want him to be my father. I don't know. There's a lot of complexities going on. Maybe I should go back to therapy. But no, he did explain all the different treatments, all the different options, all the stuff I'd already tried, like antidepressants that just didn't really do what they needed to do. And he did say, look, like if this, and this doesn't work, some people do opt for a full hysterectomy. And then he explained, obviously, why it was a full hysterectomy rather than just your womb, because obviously your ovaries are the things producing the hormones that your brain's having an abnormal reaction to. So it would have to be both. So it's been in the back of my mind for years, really. And it doesn't matter really how many years, I think, how many years it's kind of on the table. When it comes to the point where you have to make a decision, it's still really hard. I know a therapist that I was seeing a few years ago, I think maybe her own thoughts and opinions about elective hysterectomies, I think that kind of influenced me for a while, because she was very, very holistic in her approach. And as wonderful as she was, I think it confused me. Because, yeah, I know that Dr. Khan was very hesitant about suggesting it, but knowing that I should make my own decisions. And I think that's the thing, is that actually what you need is all the information to be given to you, so you can sit with it and actually figure out what's best for you as an individual. And that within itself is so hard to do, I think, as a woman, especially at the moment, where we're supposed to be mothers, or we're supposed to be completely innocent, or if we're not completely innocent, then we're, a nasty woman or something like that. And, there's been many times where I've been at children's parties for children in the family, and, an almost complete stranger would ask me when I'm planning on having children, or don't I feel like I'm, you know, an incomplete woman because I don't have that. And whilst knowing all of those things, yeah, I've had to weigh all of it up in order to make this decision. And I think we finally had this conversation just before Christmas, me and Dr. Khan, and I think the thing that swayed it for me was that I spent most of my all of my teenage years in foster care, and I just know how much that changed my life. And I probably wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for, going into care. Even though going into care in itself is a trauma, like, it got me away from a situation that, I don't know how I would have gotten out of it if not. And also I know that there's so many children all over the world that just need somewhere to call home. And so that's something that I suppose I've always thought about it in the back of my head, but to actually realise that is something that I want in my life. Realising that I'm not having my own biological child has never been something that's like been top of the list for me. It's and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, to in some ways make it a slightly easier choice, but yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. And then again, thinking about my nan, and as much as she loved young children and she would want great grandchildren, I think she would probably kick my ass if she knew that I was even considering like putting myself at risk for any longer than I need to be. So yeah.
And I think that's exactly it as well. It's like a life or death decision, isn't it, really? And I think this isn't an easy decision to make by any means, but you're making this decision because you're ultimately not safe. Exactly. And your life matters so much. And when you're feeling good, it does, God, I'd be lost without you. But I think when you're feeling good, you know that you want to be on this earth. You know that that's not a decision you actually want to make. And so for you to make that decision, I think it's massively important and the right thing to do, but it's something that is so individual and only a decision that you can make.
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned to you a while back that because now we've made this decision, there is the option of obviously freezing your eggs. And just for, I think Dr. Khan wanted me to speak with the fertility team because he'd spoken to them and they'd come back and said, we wouldn't offer Kim egg freezing on the NHS because we generally only offer that to people with cancer where it's a life or death situation. And I think he must have read my facial expression and he was like, you want to speak to me yourself, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I do. And so let's just see if that happens. But yeah, I've also made the decision probably not to freeze my eggs because I would have to go private. And
it's not a cheap thing to do. It's an incredibly expensive thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at least a couple of grand, and that'll be an ongoing cost as well because of keeping them on ice. There must be a nicer way of putting that. But I think the other thing is that I would be worried about any children inheriting that, and would I want a child to go through that? And it's affected the whole family because now, like, I'm looking at my niece. And just like I've had to brief her parents about what to look out for and, that it could be genetic. So, yeah, it's got a ripple effect, really.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting that the doctor said that you can't have it on the NHS because it's not a life or death matter. And I think that actually just goes to show how little understanding there is in the medical world. It's not their fault. They've not been educated on it. They've not been exposed to it. So you only know what you know. But I think it just goes to show that there's a long way to go for understanding PMDD and recognizing it as the severe condition that it is. And that kind of leads me on to my next question, because as a trustee of the PMDD project, what changes do you want to see how PMDD is understood and how it's treated?
I mean, obviously we're early days, aren't we? But I mean, it came to me, I think, after we did our first workshop with trainee GPs in the NHS. And it took, I mean, I know it did with you as well. It took me days to process it, because it was a 2-hour workshop for one thing, but showing a story and stuff like that. And yeah, for me, it kind of felt like something good can come out of all of this. And actually, we can spread awareness, and we can actually put pressure on people to make a change and make sure that, you know, the support networks that we have in place in this country, like the NHS, like mental health and employers and educators, that we can actually reach out and work together so that people have a better chance of actually being diagnosed and getting the help that they need. And I think an offshoot of that is, hopefully at one point, the more people that know about it, there'll be less social stigma related to it, because it is, even I kind of like feel awkward sometimes telling people about it, or, you know, you just don't want to say anything because, you know, certain people don't really understand women's health, or they get scared when you mention suicide, or they get scared when you talk about periods or hormones. And I would love for there to be more safe places where people can talk about these things and just know that they're safe and they're being listened to. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I would love the same. If there was one thing then that you wish more people knew about PMDD as a condition, what would it be?
I think for me, it's an ongoing journey with this, but I think when you over-identify with your condition, you kind of sometimes lose who you are. And the thing is that this condition can take over your life anyway. It's easy to forget who you are, but as soon as you give over to it, it's like there's no space for hope. So I would just say that whether you have PMDD, you think you have it, or you know somebody that has it, like, just remember that there is a person there. It's not just PMDD. It's not just their symptoms. And the more that you are in touch with who you are and what you want out of your life, I promise you that things will get better at some point, that there is always hope. So yeah, I think.
No, I think that's a really nice piece of advice. Something that people need to hear.
I thought so. That's why I said it.
Yeah, no, I think that's bang on. Unless you said it there.
All right then, cool.
Yeah. No, but thank you. That's a really good piece of advice. And finally, my last question is, how can people best support someone they love who is experiencing PMDD?
I guess this one is, I instantly think of my housemate. I don't think you mind me saying. His name's Martin, and he's wonderful. And I think it depends what stage somebody is at in their journey, if they are actually in crisis, or if you're, I don't know, they've told you about their symptoms, or they're further down, they're in treatment, or post-hysterectomy, or whatever. I think there's a different approach for each thing. Firstly, know that you're not alone. Know that there are people and organisations like the PMDD Project, that we've been there, that there are resources, this signposting. There's things like advocacy organisations that can give free support if you need, I don't know, somebody to represent you with the NHS, or put in a complaint, or fight for your right to treatment. So yeah, there are other people out there that can help. And I know it must be so scary when you're with somebody that you love so much, that is just in so much pain. And I just promise you that there is hope out there, and that things are going to get better. Just remember to reach out for some help.
Oh, I think that's a really nice way to finish this conversation as well. I think you've hit the nail on the head. For people that actually have PMDD, but also people that are supporting someone with PMDD, sometimes it can feel like there's no hope. And I suppose depending on the severity of the person's condition, yeah, it can feel like there's no end to it. There's no end in sight, and all is lost, but all isn't lost.
I think it is just like remembering that you know that person. Like, if I try to explain some of the things that Martin did with me when I was in crisis, like, he would make sure that, like, he'd be sleeping on a chair in my room while I couldn't sleep, just so that I wasn't alone. Or in between, like, fits of crying, he would remind me who I am. And he would tell me, like, he'd say a joke that only us two would get from, like, because we've been friends since we were 17. Like, and it's just to bring you back to yourself, even if it's for a few seconds. Like, that is something that, generally any medical practitioner might not be able to do. That's where, like, you come in. So, yeah.
We all need a Martin in our life, clearly.
You can't have him.
No, you're stealing him. That's fine.
Yes.
Whatever. No, but thank you so much, Kim, for sharing your experience and for giving the amazing tips that you have given as well. And as always, if anyone has found this conversation difficult and would like to speak to one of us a little bit more about it, or to be signposted to the right level of support, please just get in touch, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But Kim, thank you so much for joining The Monthly Truth, and for joining us, and for just generally being an incredible person.
What can I say? I didn't even try. I'm so joking. Thank you. Thank you so much.